Forward and Out has been made possible by the generous support of the following: The Loft, Lesbian and Gay Community Services Center, In the Life, Stephanie's Living Room, Psychological Motivations, The Color Group, Carol Halbert, Licensed Associate Broker, The Coven Cafe, Bars Club Cafe, Metropolitan Design Associates.
I'm Robert Rizzo, and welcome to Forward and Out. Senior Action in a Gay Environment, or SAGE, is an organization dedicated to the needs and concerns of the elderly members of the lesbian and gay community. On this edition, several of our elders share their feelings about aging, being out, and how involvement with SAGE has enriched their lives. Here's a warm and personal look at some older members of our family in a SAGE film, A Family Portrait.
I was born in New York City, August 7th, 1908. You weren't a gleam in your father's eye yet.
I was never aware of my sexuality at all until there was actually my coming out.
Well, in those days, what you did is you went to school, you made friends, you got married and had children.
I grew up in a homophobic church where I was taught that homosexuals were excluded from the kingdom of heaven. And therefore I grew up with a lot of fear of God.
The gay life wasn't quite that wild in those days either. I mean, we were together, everything was basically in the village. Most of us were not bar people, but we would go to the bars just to get together and be together.
If you have been in the closet a longer time, I say you can adjust to it. But say if you haven't come out the closet till later in your life, then it's very hard to come out and be so outspoken.
I'm old-fashioned, but I don't mind it. That's how I want to be, as long as you agree to stay old-fashioned with me. Oh, won't you stay old-fashioned with me? Oh, please just stay old-fashioned with me.
I was extremely uncomfortable with the aging process, and I read about a thing called a 50-plus rap group for women. Well, I'll stop in there and see what it's all about. That was SAGE. That was my new beginning, actually, because I went into the 50-plus rap group. It was a group of wonderful women. They're my own age. We sat, we talked about things we felt, and our concerns, and our interests, and our sadnesses, and our joys, and it was just a great thing. We met once a week. We just chatted. That was my beginning with SAGE. Since then, I've gotten very, very involved in it.
I'd come out at 21, more or less. Where I came from, the bars were illegal until you were 21, so I waited, and I came out with a bang, and did all kinds of silly things like running around with a tie on and trying to swagger around so that the other dykes would know who I was. And it was just like play acting, really.
Coming out old was a lot more difficult than coming out gay. unfortunately, whatever. I was part of the same old thing that we grew up with, that you have to be young and wonderful and beautiful, and if you have wrinkles and are old, and then it's the end of life. And so I kind of went through life pretending that I wasn't getting old, and as I say, when I got to 60, suddenly there it was. I was getting old. It was difficult for me, actually, adjusting to that, and I must say I haven't quite fully adjusted yet. But I'm beginning to feel and accept the fact that being old is just another process in life, that it's actually, for me, it's being a hell of a lot of fun, that I am learning a lot more, I am living a lot more, and I sure expect a lot more to happen. But the process was a very difficult one, and it is a continuing process. And because outside there, the world is saying, you know, not only is gay terrible, but being old is terrible. Well, neither one is really terrible. Both are, you know, if that's for you, it's wonderful. And as I say, I'm having a ball.
When I was about 39 or so, I think I learned by hindsight that I had been gay prior to that, but didn't do anything about it. I was married, had 2 children, and I was a typical housewife. And I got to know some gay friends, and I realized what was wrong with my marriage. I was not living with my husband then. We had separated 10 years prior. And there was another man in my life, and that wasn't working out too well. And after my first recognition of the fact that I might be gay, I realized that there was nothing wrong with me, except that my lifestyle was not a true one for me.
Well, of course, in the old days, and I say old days because it is about 40 years ago, we didn't talk about gay. I mean, it was, you were queer or, you know, things like that. And everything was so hush-hush. When I first heard about SAGE, I thought of it as strictly a senior citizen group. And I think that's why I wasn't interested. But once I got to see what was going on, to see how many wonderful young people are very actively involved, I think that turned me on right away. And I found that SAGE has done a great deal for a great many people. The Friendly Visitors certainly is doing a marvelous job. I know the group activities, the social activities, the dances, of which I'm quite active with. That's something that many people need. And by helping bringing these people who just stay stuck in their homes, bringing them out, taking them down to the socials in wheelchairs, that's the greatest.
One of the major problems of elderly people is that they're in many ways isolated. They tend to have a number of chronic illnesses, and so if there are no senior centers, if there are no avenues of socialization, they tend to spend a lot of time at home, isolated, thinking about their illnesses.
5, 4, 3.
The gay seniors have a special situation, a special social situation that they've had for many years, and for obvious reasons would like to be amongst people who have shared their experiences and who they can be open with. It is very hard for older gay people to be as open as some young gay people are now because of the history of tremendous prejudice and secrecy that gay people had to live with. So SAGE, for instance, is an enormously important type of social outlet for gay seniors.
When I came to SAGE, initially I came with all the uptight baggage that I'd lived with all my life. It's hard for young people to understand what older homosexuals went through, and I had grown up being told that I was sick and a deviant, and that's always been in the back of my head. And I came to SAGE seeking a sort of freedom within the community, and I never suspected that I would declare myself outside of the community.
I couldn't talk to somebody else at a senior center about my lover and about my life and about the wonderful things that I do. They talking about their families, I'd talk about my sister, but it's not the same thing. It's not a sharing. That's one of the things, is we couldn't share.
We socialize at the socials, the drop-in centers, and the brunches has been a help. So it gives an outlet that I have a lot of people that I know, and we get to talk with one another and visit one another, and which has been very good.
The gay and lesbian population of New York City is like your elderly population anywhere, with the same problems in terms of surviving. The difference is that they're gay and lesbian, and they are primarily invisible. And they have been closeted all their lives. They have lived with a secret. And all of their energy has gone into maintaining the secret, whether it's from their doctor, their lawyer, their job, their family. So they don't have that much energy left to face the troubles of being older unless they can break down that secret and begin to be themselves. These are people who are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s now. So they lived in the time where they were told by the church they were immoral. The police said they were criminal. God said they were evil. Society said they were sick. So they carry a lot of baggage with them when they reach those, quote, golden years, and therefore it's very difficult.
Well, as years went by, we were all grown up, and I was already living with a lover, a woman. We discussed my cousin Chaim, and one of my brothers said, sure, he was a fairy. And my father said, what's a fairy? And my sisters described to my father in Yiddish what we thought Chaim was. And my father got up in anger, stormed out of the room and said, pooh, in our family that never was. And my sister said to my mother, you know, Mama, there are even women like that who live together as a couple. And my mother's naive reply was, better like that, better than they should live with bums.
I don't think there's an adequate response within the religious community to the needs of the elderly, especially in parish settings and neighborhood settings. Basically, the reason is that most gay seniors, in the context of their religious setting, the parish church, are in the closet, and very few are out or open, so there has been no ability of the church to respond to their needs because the church's teaching is so harsh on this matter that if any gay person is in a relationship, they're forbidden Holy Communion until they give up the relationship. So how can the church respond to their needs when it has such a homophobic position itself? It's just impossible.
I've lived with certain types of prejudice all my life. I remember Jewish discrimination. I remember radical discrimination. And now I know gay discrimination. I've lived with it all my life. Sometimes I ignored it and sometimes I fought it. But it'll be here for some time to come until we really educate people into feeling differently about the things we believe in.
I don't go to change anyone's point of view on gays in this society. I don't go to break through any religious or moral kinds of feelings. What I go for is to say to people that if you're in a field that is committed to helping people, then you are in a field that's committed to helping minorities. And therefore, you have an obligation to serve everyone. And if you can't, get out of the field.
Bruce's condition of health has made a complete role reversal in our lives. I know that
Bruce and Jean have been together as a couple for over 60 years now. Jean first came to us a couple years ago because Bruce was starting to have memory loss problems. Bruce was finally officially diagnosed a year ago as having Alzheimer's disease.
One of the things I think that is probably the most difficult to deal with, and I am constantly mindful of how much frustration Bruce is feeling when he has such difficulty in finding words to express himself.
Right. That's got to be very hard for you too, Bruce.
That may be more than I expect, because I know I have worked through these things with him so long.
Yeah.
And the fact that my learning to try to catch the thing that
we are very aware of the fact that our people who are together for many years have no rights. There's no social security for the survivor. A will can be broken in this state very carefully, so we are very much hooked into lawyers for our people to protect them when they want to be protected. So we're very connected with all of that. We're very realistic. We're a family, but we're a very small family in a very large society, and we know that we have to address all of the homophobic issues that are out there always. So we even went so far as with one hospital to have them change their intake form, and it now says married, single, divorced, relationship, long-term relationship.
Unfortunately, if somebody's partner decides to make themselves known to the medical caretaker at the time of an emergency, they're not going to be given any credence. And you know, that's a very complicated issue. That has to do with gay people not being recognized as having legal marriages. People who are gay, who are living together, or who are just important friends have to draw up papers and let the physician know, or let the patient's lawyers know, that they are the person who can make those decisions.
There is one gay person out of every 10 people in the United States, and we let ourselves be known throughout the country for the benefit of those people who are sadly isolated. When I first started, we were 50 people. Our socials, people brought bagels and cream cheese, somebody else brought soda, and we had a social. Now we have a social that's attended by 200, 300, 400, and 500 people.
I have noticed that people feel more comfortable in hooking up with Sage, feel maybe never that comfortable about their gayness because they spend so many years of being put down because of it, but a beginning pride in who they are, more of a freedom to be who they are, less depressed, less isolated, part of a family.
So Howie, what do you think of this guy?
Oh, that's...
Please, he just ate.
He's quite wonderful. I shouldn't say it in front of him. He's very friendly. He comes to the house. When he's coming to the house, he calls me before he gets there to see if I need anything from the store. And if I do, he'll bring it in for me. Of course, he eats everything he brings in, but
you can't have everything.
I think Howie represents many of our friends at home. Howie is in his 70s. He lived for many years with a lover, over 40 years. They lived together in Queens. When you're gay and your lover dies, you lose your wife, your husband, and you feel the same grief, but society doesn't validate that grief, so you kind of go through it alone. And a couple of Howie's friends called us and said, this man is lonely, he's isolated, go on out there. So we reached out, and he became a part of Sage.
I feel like crawling up the wall sometimes. If I didn't have things to do, I don't know what I would do. I do knitting, I do needlepoint, I make rugs, make boxes, read, do puzzles. I can't sit still and do nothing.
Howie is truly a doll, and if you do him a very small favor, he behaves as if you've just built a bridge for him. I'm glad that I get to see him so that since he's now not too keen on walking by himself, that I can get him out of the house and over to the stores to pick up a carton of cigarettes or over to the deli to get something special to eat. Because after all, when you're cooking for one, you tend not to cook as much or as well. So this way he gets the kind of treats he deserves. And it also prevents the kind of cabin fever that takes hold of people when they've got too much time to spend by themselves in the house. And I think that's been about as much use as anything I could do for him, aside from the day that I tore down his curtains and put up the new ones in 3 minutes. He thought it was going to take a month and a half, and while he was in the bathroom, I took care of it.
And if for some reason he has to work, I get very upset. I want him to come to the house. But no, it's nice to have him come to the house. And since he doesn't rush, he doesn't pop in and just pop out again. That's what makes it nice. I feel as if he's my friend. I think he is. You know he is.
I'm glad that's so.
All of us volunteers having a common goal, have a common respect, and a great deal of reaching out together. I don't know if I made that clear, but for instance, Bob, I mean, I admire what he does. The man is incapacitated, but it doesn't stop him. He does what he can with his beautiful posters and things. That kind of thing. So everyone does what he can.
Well, having seen several parades, I thought that they needed a little more pulling together. I took one of these little sage things, which was on the envelope, and blew it up to a large size, cut them out, pasted them on, cut the felt. Another member cut the felt panels out, and I pasted them on, and that's how they were done. And then we put them on light bamboo sticks so people could carry them without having any weight, knowing some might be always a good to make it light. So we did that and a couple of other things that tied them all together. So the colors were there, and it gave it all over look to the bulk of the parade that was sage.
I was 70 years of age, getting lonely, feeling my age creeping up on me with diminishing relationships and friendships and a certain amount of isolation. So I came into SAGE, and about 6 months afterwards, I began to participate more actively in the work of SAGE.
I met a SAGE volunteer at a party, and she said, you know, you really ought to come to SAGE. I said, not me, not me. I'm neither, I'm not ready for it, and I'm not old enough. And she said, we have volunteers from 19 to 90. Please come and join us. And I promised I would, went to a SAGE social, and was hooked.
Dignity is not something you give yourself. It is something we give each other. So there has to be a community in which to be a gay person in a healthy way. You have to have a gay community where you accept each other, and in that acceptance you can accept yourself. And so that process of self-acceptance needs a communal expression. And that's what was totally absent in the old days. There was no one you could turn to and expect acceptance. You know, you could only expect to be rejected, to cause pain, trouble. I've known many a gay person who had to flee their country or their hometown because they thought that if it came out that they were gay, it would destroy their parents. So my self-acceptance was their destruction. You know, am I conforming to their needs was my destruction. And this is the terrible dilemma that most gay people faced in the old days. And there's a beginning of a breakthrough now, and an ability to be a gay person, integrate fully your religious faith into that, and to be acceptable to your parents, your community at large. It's just beginning, but it's very hopeful for the future. I think young people, hopefully, if things keep going the way they're going, young people can grow up much less scarred, much less traumatized than we did as gay people. And that gives me great joy to think that there will be a lot healthier and happier gay people in the future than there was in the past.
I can't talk about being an old woman, but I can feel what it's like to be an old woman. It's the pits. I can't do what I did when I was young. I look at life much more philosophically now. I know my limitations, but I know too that as long as I'm active and alert and socially conscious and working for the social betterment of myself, my companions, the gay world, the AIDS-stricken people, I'll stay young. And I'm trying my best to do that. Sure. Sure, I mind growing old, but I think of the alternative, and that devastates me altogether.
I see in them hope for a future for younger gay generations, particularly in the age of AIDS, where so many people are so afraid of dying, so afraid of not having an old age. I see it now, I see old age now as something to hope for, not something to fear, which has been, in the past, I think, particularly in the gay community, a rampant fear of old age, fear of loss of beauty, fear of loss of vitality. But in fact, these seniors are vital.
I have been out to myself since I was about 42. I realized that I was gay, that I was a lesbian, and I was very closeted. Gradually, I came out of the closet. I became active in various gay organizations, but nevertheless, a great part of me was still in the closet. And last night, I went through a lot of painful soul searching, and I came to this conclusion, that as long as I refused to really come out, not only to me, and to my children who know, and my grandchildren, until I really came out to the world, I was not free. That I allowed the shackles of prejudice to make a prisoner out of me. That's why I'm here, Michael. I decided that come hell or high water, I've got to come out entirely while I'm still alive. I don't want to have lived in the closet and die in the closet. I'm a lesbian. I've lived a good life, and I'm here now.
I was just reading the other day Dante's Divine Comedy, and he mentions after he's been through hell and purgatory, as he's approaching heaven, he hears this strange sound, and he keeps wondering what it is, and as he gets closer, he realizes it's this extraordinary laughter. He called it the laughter of the universe, fills heaven. And the thought occurred to me, it's the laughter of all those elderly gay people who felt outside everything all their lives, alienated, and thought they'd be alienated after death. And then they die and go to heaven and find they belong. And they're all right. And so there's this joyful laughter that will burst out. And I find myself having that sense of joyful laughter that Dante describes in Il Paradiso.
I'm old-fashioned. I love the moonlight. I love the old-fashioned things. The sound of rain upon a window pane. The starry song that April sings. This year's fancies are passing fancies, but sighing sighs, holding hands, ease my heart understands. I'm old-fashioned, but I don't mind it.
Your local Gay and Lesbian Community Services Center is a place to connect and get involved. Various ongoing groups and social events are conducted at or by your center, and it is also a clearinghouse of gay and lesbian information nation and worldwide. We urge you to join, get involved, and support your community.